Nobody's brave. Nobody's being. Oh, hello, Owen. Come on down.
I don't mind having silly questions, you know. That's
she doesn't mind silly questions. Now that opens it up.
Hello. Who are you?
I'm Owen. Yeah. So my question was, so I know that Boris Johnson had an education in classics and became a mayor, but how do you believe that, like, the research that you and others do on Roman culture and just ancient archaeology in general works to the benefits of today's society or just societies in general?
Boris Johnson's a problem for me.
I did reassure him. I did reassure them that at the time you debated Boris, he was just mayor at the time, and
he was just mayor. And you know, to be fair to him, it was a charity gig in aid of a charity called Classics for All, which is trying to put classics back into state schools, what you'd call public schools in the UK. And you know, I was very, very, very pleased, I have to confess, to beat Boris. It was the finest day of my life. But I should be fair and say that he was giving up his time for a charitable cause. So, you know, how do I justify? I mean, if and I don't know whether I'm saying something which is very British here. If I go to a high school in the UK and people say, why should we, why on earth do you bother with that? You know, why on earth do you bother with that stuff? I mean, they're all dead 2,000 years ago. You know, what would I say? I'd say, look, partly this is the very British bit. I'd say, you live in a place called Colchester. Why do you think it's called Colchester? Well, it's because it had a Roman camp called Castra in your town. Why your town is here is because the Romans were here. Right? And, why is London in such a damn stupid place for a capital city? It's because that's where it was convenient for Rome. So in the UK, you can start by making an argument about understanding why our country is as it is, partly in the mess that it's in. It's because it's still 2,000 years later inherited a Roman version of itself. And the more we understand that, the better. I think, though, and that's not going to, I'm afraid, despite all the loony theories, I'm afraid the Romans never did get to America. So we can't use that. I found during the pandemic here, I found different ways into answering your question. Because, huge amounts of resource went in, absolutely rightly, to making vaccines, discovering vaccines, spreading vaccines, giving the medical answer to the pandemic. And that was, I'm not saying for a minute that wasn't important. But I did used to say to people when we were talking more generally, I used to say, well, what's the first work of Western literature ever, not just that survives, or what is the first work of Western literature? It's Homer's Iliad. How does Homer's Iliad start? It starts with a plague. It starts with a pandemic. What about Sophocles' Oedipus the King? How does that start? Starts with a plague. What is the kind of one most memorable scene in Thucydides' history of the Peloponnesian War? It's the plague in Athens. Now, we need to do two things when we're facing a kind of human crisis like COVID. One is we need to muster science to deal with it. That's really important. But we also have to think about it. And we have to think about how it affects people. We have to think about how people in the past have dealt with plagues, what plagues mean, as well as how you eradicate them. And I think in some ways classics came into its own, if you say to somebody, the very start of Western literature is dealing with pandemic, they used to say, oh my God, is it? Yeah, yes, it is. And one of the ways that people are going to come through this, we're still not through COVID in all kinds of ways. One of the ways we're going to come through this is not only by solving it scientifically, that's important, but we have to get our heads around what it means. We have to think about it, think about how we explain pandemics. And I don't think, we're not going to follow the Iliad's view that it all comes from the gods, but those kind of things do really, they help us think about us. And I think that, I'm quite interested. I quite like the ancient Greeks and Romans in a way. In another way, I think they're awful. I enjoy thinking about them, but I'm more interested in getting people to use them to think about us. And I think they do that in all kinds of different ways, and it's fun. It is actually fun. I mean, who would imagine that we still had letters surviving by people written 2,000 years ago. That's a privilege to be dealing with those. No, it's not. This is not the only place in the world where you find that kind of that kind of long history, and we would be, I think, very, we're a bit Western civvy if we thought that the Greeks and the Romans were unique. They're not unique, but they are very special. And I think that they help us think about us, really.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Principal of our school came in to see how the talk was going, and I was like, "You want to come and ask questions?" But he said, "No."
I know.
He's not a Latinist, but I did ask him to come in. So he seemed to be enjoying it. Okay, next question. Somebody who has written down a question. Yes, great.
It's so wonderful to see you, Bettina, so much kind of engaged as teacher. I've not met Bettina in her role as teacher before. So
thank you, Mary. I know, right? Because we've met socially, we've met with me as performing, but as a teacher,
I've never seen her in the classroom, so this is exciting for me.
This is so fun.